Hello and welcome to our galactic family. I'm Graham Douillet. My guest today is Robert Dean. Mr. Dean is a retired U.S. Army Command Sergeant Major, serving 28 years in the military and trained as an intelligence analyst. He is an expert ufologist and has worked globally to raise awareness about extraterrestrials, UFOs, and the government's cover-up of the extraterrestrial presence and beings from other worlds. He has studied extensively the fields of archaeology, theology, ancient history, psychology, and philosophy. Welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you, Graham. It's my pleasure.
Now, there are so many areas that we could cover in today's show, and there are many internet videos of you giving presentations at conferences on documentaries. You've done a tremendous amount of interviews all about the presence of UFOs and the cover-up of extraterrestrials. What I was hoping to focus on today was your personal experience with extraterrestrials to help us better understand who they are, why they're here, and how they're here to help us. In a recent interview you did with Terry Cassidy last February with your friend Clifford Stone, there was a point during the interview where you briefly mentioned that you'd been aboard a ship and you were shown what the future Earth would look like. And I'm particularly interested in hearing more about that and about your personal experiences with extraterrestrials. Many of the people that will be listening to the show do know who you are, but for those that are just getting to know you, could you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with this field?
Oh, my God. How much time do we have? Graham, I got into this whole thing. I kind of walked in through the back door, as it were. I was given a special assignment in 1963. I was in the military. I applied for and received a special assignment to Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers in Europe. At that time was located just outside of Paris. It was a choice assignment, and you really had to apply for it, and it was a select assignment. I was able to take my wife and my kids off to Paris, France. My kids went to high school in Paris, and I was in Paris, outside of Paris at least, for about 5 years. But when I got there in 1963, I was introduced to a study that was underway. It seems that World War III had almost been triggered half a dozen times by strange metallic circular objects flying in formation all over Europe. And in those days, Europe was divided right down the middle. There was the Warsaw Pact and the communist powers in the east, and then there was the NATO powers in the west. Mm-hmm. And Germany was divided right down the middle, and everybody was armed to the teeth. And these objects were flying all over the damn place, in formation at a high altitude, obviously under intelligent control. We found the Soviets thought they belonged to us, and for a short time we actually thought they might belong to the Soviets. But with the repeated demonstration of advanced technology that they showed us, it became very clear after a while that neither we or the Soviets had that kind of capability. So this study was underway when I got there in 63, and they finished it, published it in 64, and it was my introduction to the reality of the extraterrestrial presence. I got into the study. I had a cosmic top secret clearance at the time, Graham. It was and still is the highest level of classification security clearance in NATO. And I had access to the document when they published it in 64, and I was never able to put it down or walk away from it. And that was my introduction to the reality of the extraterrestrial presence. And I haven't been able to walk away from it since.
And you've been doing a lot of work over the years, for sure. Now, we can jump right into it. I understand you've had face-to-face contacts with extraterrestrials.
Yeah, I've had many face-to-face contacts over the years. That took me a while to get used to, by the way. I didn't know whether I was dreaming. Sometimes if they take me out of my bed in the middle of the night and I would end up being aboard their ships. I've been on some of their ships at least half a dozen times that I remember vividly, probably more times than that. And I've had face-to-face meetings with them at conferences, Graham. I've had them come up to me in conferences during breaks and introduce themselves, for God's sake. And they look pretty much just like us, you know. Humans are kind of interesting creatures. We follow a pattern, but we're all distinctly unique in one way or another. And these guys are pretty much the same. They're humanoid. They look like humans, but you look them in the eye, and you notice, they're not human. There's an intensity. When you look in their eyes, there's an intensity and a depth when you look into their eyes where you know that these guys are not Joe Smith just down the street. They are different. They are distinctly different.
And when you say you've gone up into their ships, is that done physically, astrally, both?
Well, physically, yeah. I've been on several of their ships for physical examinations. They grab me once in a while and take me aboard, and they run me through a physical exam, and they put you on a table, and you're stark-ass naked, and they lay you on a table and give you a thorough examination. Generally speaking, there's about 10 or 15 or 20 other humans around there, and they're all going through the same process. But I've been on their ship several times, Graham, and I've gotten to a point where I've got kind of a relationship with some of those guys.
And this is with your consent?
I'm sorry?
This is with your consent. They aren't taking.
I've never felt that I've been abducted in that sense. You remember Whitley Strieber and his stories about he was forcibly abducted, and the poor guy was traumatized. And I know Whitley; he's a friend of mine, and I've read most of his books. And I saw Whitley just this last October in. No, not October. I'm sorry, February here in Phoenix at the World Conference. And he is still traumatized. But what happened to him years ago when he was writing the book Communion? So a lot of people find this kind of exchange and this interrelationship with them very, very traumatic. But Graham, I've never felt that I was forcibly abducted. I've always felt like I was invited. And I was always voluntarily, hell, I'm going for it. Show me something. I'd like to learn something new.
And what have you learned when you've gone on the ships? I mean, have you been able to see them? Have you been able to get a sense of their size and layout?
Oh yeah, by all means. The ones on board the ships that I've encountered are rather tall and rather thin. They're not skinny by any means, but they're trim. And the guys that were giving me the medical examination generally are well over 6 feet tall and rather trim. And they're humanoid. They look pretty much like we do, except that I say they're taller than we are. But when you look into their eyes, that's when you know that they're not human.
And how would you communicate?
Maybe they're human, but they're more than human, Graham.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they strike me as being us maybe 100,000 years in the future. They're us essentially, but there's more to it than that. They have a depth, they have an understanding, they have an intensity, and when they look into your eyes, they look like they're reading you. They don't have to communicate with words as we do here. They seem to be able to communicate quite efficiently with thought. And there are times that they've communicated with me and their lips were not moving. And that took me some getting used to, I can tell you.
And how would you communicate back to them?
It's a telepathic form of communication, and that seems to be a standard process for them. You know it. You know exactly what they're thinking.
And that's how you would communicate with them?
Well, when I was with them, they took me away for 6 weeks. That really is what blew me away. that I was just a nutcase. I was going crazy, man. I had more questions than you can imagine. I was just jabbering away and asking questions here and there and everything because I wanted to know, where the hell was I? Mm-hmm. I never did know where I was, Graham. I don't think I was aboard a ship. I've been aboard ships, and some of their ships are absolutely gigantic. I mean, they're gigantic. They're several miles across. But this particular case, when they had me for 6 weeks, I didn't feel I was aboard a ship. Now, I could have been. But the sun was warm, the grass was green, the water in the little streams in the gardens was cold and clear, and there were flowers all over the place, and it was like a big, beautiful park. And I thought I was in a small city. And I asked them repeatedly, where the hell am I? Where are we? And I never really got an answer. Only once did one of the females apparently took pity on me because I'd been jabbering away and asking this question again and again. She says, this is Melina. Now, Graham, I have no idea what the hell that meant. She said to me, this is Melina. Now, whether that was a city, whether that was a planet, I don't know. I didn't feel that I was aboard a ship because the sun was warm and the wind was blowing, and it was like a lovely afternoon in the park. It was a small city.
Would you say it looked a lot like something you might experience here on Earth?
Oh, my God, yes. You know, you go into a little rural area outside of most of the big cities, and you find these little subdivisions where there are gardens and parks and streets and sidewalks and libraries and one thing or another. It struck me as like it was a small city. But I never did see anything in the way of vehicles. They certainly don't use automobiles. Everybody seemed to be walking. And I never saw a building that was more than 2 or 3 stories high at the most. But the things that impressed me the most where I was, Graham, is that I guess it was the school, the auditorium, the lecture halls, and the libraries. I was more overwhelmed by those than I think anything else that I'd seen.
Why is that?
Well, the lecture halls, it's obvious that, you know, they took me into one lecture hall, which I swear I'd been there before. I had a sense of familiarity with the place. And it was one of those, well, what is it, the Greek and Roman amphitheater form? You go in on the ground floor, and then it goes down about 2 levels in an amphitheater kind of a classroom with the stage down at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And I'd been there before, but I couldn't remember just exactly when.
Now you said
then the library, that was the thing that really blew me away. The library was one of the most extensive libraries I've ever been into, but it was almost entirely electronic.
I see.
There weren't that many books. Most of it was apparently on computers. And that was impressive. They pulled up a couple of things for me and showed me a few things. Because, man, I was just a nutcase. I was just jabbering away and asking questions like crazy.
What was the computer like?
Well, they asked me one time, they said that you seem to be a student of history. Is that correct? I said, yes. I've always been fascinated by human history. You know, it was one of my majors when I was in college years ago. And they said, well, what part of history are you interested in? And I said, well, there's one thing that I've always wanted to know more about, and that's about a young man and a young human being by the name of Alexander III, about 300 BC. And they said, oh, yes. And they went to this computer and poked into a bunch of things, and so help me God, a screen appeared, a big, wide screen. You know, it was better and clearer than anything you'd ever see in a theater. Mm-hmm. And there was a battle battle being fought by Alexander the Great in Persia about 300 BC, right in front of my eyes. And they could pull that up, and it was so real, it was almost like I was being there. You know, you hear the sounds, you could smell the smells, and my God, it was shocking.
Now, these are
and that's what they seemingly are able to tap into. I got the impression that this was what they call the Akasha.
Right.
There seems to be an infinite record of human history from the very beginning of our origins up until not only now, but apparently into our future as well. And that's something else that I had a hell of a time coming to terms with.
What other technology did you experience while you were there that really struck you?
Oh, Jesus. Well, first of all, how I got there. They grabbed my ass out of the middle of the night, and I sleep in my shorts. I sleep in my BVDs. And here I am, taken aboard this ship in my BVDs, and I'm in kind of a little lounge area where there are comfortable chairs, and they bring me out, look like a pair of pajamas, elastic band around the waist, and long leg pants, and a loose top, just like a pair of pajamas that you would, you know, a lot of people sleep in. And they gave that to me, told me to put it on and keep me from getting chilly. And I was aboard what I apparently thought was a ship, no more than 20 or 25, 30 minutes at the most. And the next thing I know, wherever we were, Melina or whatever it was, a city or a planet or something. And I spent 6 weeks with them. And that's literally shattered my life, Graham. I jokingly told you the other day when we were chatting, I said I'd went through a period where I thought I was losing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That was phase 1. Then I went through phase 2, where I had become convinced that I had lost my mind. And I went through that, and now I'm in phase 3. That I've convinced myself that I'm sane and the rest of the world is nuts.
Now, when you
and I'm comfortable with that, Graham.
It actually wasn't 6 weeks in Earth time, from what you shared with me the other day. Is that right?
Well, that's the thing that blew me away. You see, you ask about technology. What effect it had on me? What impressed me the most? I was with them literally for 6 weeks. I mean, they fed me. I went to the bathroom. They gave me a small room, but this is as comfortable as you might find in some decent little hotel or motel. I had a bathroom. I had a bed. I had a shower, and they'd bring me illustrated menu with pictures of different food items on it. Something like you find, I think, when you go to a Denny's restaurant sometimes. I mean, here's a menu with photographs on it. And then I was told that I could point to anything on there that I wanted, and they would provide it for me. And they did. Man, I ate like a pig for 6 weeks. Damn near everything I wanted, anything I'd point to, they would, within 20 minutes, they'd have it. Now, how they did it, I don't know. A couple of people have said it sounds a hell of a lot like what you saw on Star Trek, where they go over to the wall and poke the computer and something, a cup of tea would come out or whatever. But the technology that really blew me away, Graham, is when they brought me back. Because while I was with them, I was worried. I kept thinking, my God, what have my wife done? And she wakes up in the morning and I'm not there, and my clothes are still there, and I just disappeared in the middle of the night. Are the police still looking for me? After about 3 or 4 weeks, I thought, my God, There's probably police all over the place looking for the old codger. But damn it, when they brought me back 15 minutes after they took me.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you, if you don't think that just kind of shakes you up and destroys any preconceived ideas you might have of the laws of physics. And I learned that these guys are so capable of manipulating matter and manipulating time. And I'll be honest with you, Graham, after it's been 9 years and I'm still having a problem coming to terms with that. That we're dealing with advanced intelligences out there that can literally manipulate matter and time. That's one of the reasons why the lid has been slammed down on this and why it's going to stay down for a while.
Now,
our authorities have no idea of how to get the mass of people introduced to this reality. That human beings on planet Earth are so primitive and so backward, and we're confronting intelligences that could be 1,000,000 years ahead of us, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to tread very carefully here. I don't expect to see any kind of a disclosure in my lifetime. I'm still trying to come to terms with what happened to me in 2003. And even today, I find it difficult to come to terms with that because I found that all of my previous world views were completely worthless. Everything I'd been taught in school in physics, astronomy, and history, I found that most of it was just garbage. That's difficult to come to terms with when you realize that your old worldview just collapses around your knees, and you've got to build yourself a new paradigm, and it's not that easy. I understand why the lid is down on this thing and why they've clamped it down tightly, because they cannot even begin, Graham, to tell the people the whole story. No. People have got to be accustomed and gotten used to this and gently introduced to some of this material. And, if they were to start having what they call a disclosure, they'd open Pandora's box and boom, everything would come out. And the world, I honest to God, don't believe that most of the people on this planet are not ready for it, Graham.
If we could go back, of course, everything you share inspires so many questions. And one of the things I wanted to really get clear about is it sounds like you've been brought on to ships a number of times. You didn't have the sense that you were abducted. It wasn't a fearful experience. And when we spoke the other day, it sounded like you were very much interested in them, of course, asking them questions. And it sounds like they were also studying you.
That's something that really got to me, because it became clear to me after a while that they were as interested in me as I was as interested in them. And I asked them why. This one chap, I was with about 5 of them regularly. It was almost like they'd had a team assigned to me. There were 3 males and 2 females in this group. And they were the same group. They stayed with me more or less all the time. You know, they put me to bed at night, and I'd sleep like a baby for 6-8 hours. But I found that they were as fascinated by me as I was as interested in them. And I asked them one day why. And they said that, well, apparently humans have a unique genome. It seems that the genetics of the human species is rather rare and rather special. It is indeed rather unique. And they tried to explain it to me, and it seems that the human genome is made up of at least a dozen parts of chromosomes and genes from other species throughout the galaxy. That we're not merely a combination of 1 or 2, but we apparently are a blend of a whole bunch of different species and races and civilizations out there. And so the human genome is apparently somewhat unique, and they are fascinated by that, and they study that. They took samples of me. They took tissue samples, and while I was with them, for study, and apparently my genome was fascinating to them. That humans on planet Earth are rather unique and rather special. Matter of fact, one of the males said to me one time, he says, if you humans had any idea how rare and special you were, you'd treat each other a lot better. And he made his point. And I had to agree with him.
Do you know what society you were with? What extraterrestrial society you were with when you went? I mean, we hear
they never clarified that for me either. Not only did I not know, Graham, where the hell I was, but I wasn't quite sure what species or what race I was with, because they look just like we do. Other than when you look into their eyes, you notice that there's a difference in the way they look at you. There's an intensity in their eyes, that a depth. It's hard to find words to describe. There's an intensity that when they look at you, you feel like they're looking right through you. I didn't run into any so-called reptilians, and I didn't run into any of the little grays, although I have seen some of the grays before. But while I was with them, there were no grays there. Though everybody that I was with were humanoid in the sense that they could walk up and down the street and get away with it. You know, sit next to you in a restaurant and you wouldn't know the difference.
And how would you describe their energy? What was your sense of them?
That's one of the other things. When I talk about look into their eyes, you sense their energy, Graham. There's an intensity about them. I don't know whether you'd call it an aura. Possibly that is about as close as you could come, but there is an electromagnetic kind of energy that you feel when you're close to them. It's almost like a life form, a life energy. And it's very powerful. And that's when you really know that they're not human. That if they're human, they're more than human.
Would you
maybe 1,000 or 1,000,000 years ahead of us?
Would you describe that energy as a spiritual energy?
I think that's probably as close as you can get, Graham. Yeah, it's a kind of a spiritual energy. You know, all of us human beings are not material human bodies. I mean,
right.
We walk around inside these containers for 60, 80, 100 years maybe. And when this container starts getting old and falling apart, we discard it and we leave it, walk away from it. That essentially human beings are spiritual beings. Well, these guys that I've encountered are also spiritual beings. But their spirituality has an intensity to it I find overwhelming.
Would you describe that as a higher state of being, higher state of perhaps unity consciousness, more peaceful, harmonious?
Well, it's a kind of an intensity, Graham. It's like when you walk up close to an electrical machine and you can feel the static electricity. You can feel the energy, but you can't see it. You can just get close to it, you can feel it. And that's why mere words are not sufficient to describe some of the things that I've experienced.
I'm sure.
And I'll apologize to you because I find that as hard as I've been trying over the years to put these things into terms that I could share with people, I find that mere words in the English language are not sufficient to describe the depth and the intensity of my feelings and my emotions. And trying to describe what it's like being in their presence, it's like being close to an incredibly powerful spiritual being. But they look just like we do. I mean, I never saw any of them with their clothes off, you know. I said something else about my trip. I never, ever once saw any of them eat. And I looked back on that and thought that that was rather strange. They never ate in my presence. And I'm assuming that they ingested foods pretty much like I do. They had a mouth, they had teeth, and they looked healthy, but I never saw them eat. But I did a hell of a lot of eating while I was with them.
And in terms of how they look, do they look old? Do they look young?
Well, one of the males had gray hair, and I got the impression that he was the oldest of the group. As I said, there were 3 males and 2 females that stayed pretty much with me for 6 weeks. Now, one of the males looked to me like he was about 65, maybe 70, human. But he didn't look, how the hell do I describe it? He didn't look aged. He just had gray hair, and his eyes and his skin looked like he'd been around a while.
Okay.
But he didn't have any wrinkles. But it was very clear, very obvious that he was older than the other 2 males.
Children?
I'm sorry?
Did you see children?
No, never once did I see a child. I asked about that. I says, "Where are your children?" And they informed me that they were basically in school or someplace like that. Because there were the whole 6 weeks I was there, I never saw a kid. I never saw a child. And that was kind of surprising to me. So they said that yes, they had children, but their children were in school.
One of the things I've learned about are the healing chambers on ships, and I'm wondering if you had any recollection of being in a healing chamber and how you felt physically, mentally, emotionally when you came back.
Well, on this one time when I was aboard the ship, I was stark-ass naked, and I was lying on this table, and this tall being was running his hands over my body. Now, not once did his hands ever touch my body, but I felt the warmth of his hands as he went from my toes over to the top of my head. I could feel the warmth from his hands. And I got the impression that not only was he examining me, but I got the impression that he was, in a sense, probably tuning me up or healing me or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I turned 83 here just a week ago, Graham, and all things considered, the fact that I damn near died in October, I'm in pretty damn fine shape for an old codger.
That's great.
So I figure that some of this treatment, some of this, whatever the hell they were doing, I considered it a form of, healing, as it were. But not once did his hands ever touch my body. But I felt the warmth of his hands, and I got the impression that I was being not only tuned up, but examined at the same time. Now, he may have had something on his hands, but I don't remember seeing anything like gloves or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
All I remember is his very long fingers.
Was there anything you didn't like with your stay?
I'm sorry, what?
Was there anything that you didn't like, you weren't comfortable with when you were...
That's surprising. No, not one thing. The only thing that I found uncomfortable was that I could never get all the answers to the questions I was asking. I kept saying, where am I? Where are we? Am I on another planet? Am I in another dimension? Where am I? And I never really got a straight answer. And that one female kind of took pity on me, and she kind of looked at me, and she says, "This is Melina." And I haven't the slightest idea what the hell that is or what she was talking about.
Now, have you been in touch with them since?
Well, let's see. Not in the last several weeks, no. I've been healing from, I almost died in October, Graham. I came down with viral meningitis. I spoke at a Carrie Cassidy conference in Orange County last September, and about the 25th, I think it was, and 10 days later, I was in an intensive care unit in a Phoenix hospital in a coma. And I had come down with viral meningitis, and apparently the doctors thought that the old codger was kicking in, They called my wife and my son and told them that they didn't expect me to be able to make it. And so I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. Interesting term, isn't it? 6 weeks with the aliens and 6 weeks in the hospital.
Oh yeah.
But here I am, I'm slowly getting my strength back. I find that my energy level is returning slowly, not as fast as I would like. And my appetite is improving a little bit, so I'm figuring that at 83, hell, I may be around for another couple of years.
Well, that's fortunate for us. When we were talking before, and I hope this is okay that I bring it up on the show, you were mentioning that you actually felt that you died. You had an out-of-body experience, and you were encouraged to come back. Is that right?
Well, I was in a coma, and apparently I was out of my body. I have a vague memory, Graham, of being out of my body, and I have a memory of having gone home. And so help me God, no pun intended, I was told that I couldn't stay. I had to get back. And I didn't want to come back. I've been through 3 wars. I've had 3 marriages. I've had some tragedies in my life. 80-some years on this planet, Graham, has been, I'm not complaining, mind you, but I find that hanging around on planet Earth all these many years has not been a fun trip exactly. I was in the Korean War, I was in the Vietnamese War, lost a lot of friends, lost a child to suicide. I've had 3 marriages. Man, I'm tired, I figured that I paid my dues and I wanted to go home. And when I went home, so help me, they wouldn't let me stay. They told me I had to go back because I wasn't finished, and whatever the hell that meant. So maybe I was sent back to do what I'm doing right at this moment, talking to you.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. And boy, an hour never seems to be enough. Like you said, it just scratches the surface when we were talking before the show. There's one piece that I want to get to, and if we have time, I'd like to go back to your experience about the ships and more about your experience with extraterrestrials. But there was a message, or rather they showed you what the new Earth would look like. What I gather, it's quite a beautiful vision.
Well, that's the thing that really got to me. I've been running hot and cold over my life. I jokingly said to Carrie Cassidy one time that I've had a love-hate relationship with the human race since I was a kid. One minute I look at the human species and I think, oh, aren't they sweet? Aren't they lovable? Aren't they wonderful? And the next minute I'm saying, to hell with them, they're a rotten bunch of rotten so-and-sos. Blow them all up. They're not worth the powder to blow them up. And so I've had this on and off again relationship with humanity since I was a kid. Well, it's still going on, but I do believe that the human race is undergoing, and they made this very clear to me, that the entire species, Graham, is undergoing a transition. And at this moment in time, the human species is undergoing what I would describe as a transcendent transformation into a new race, into a new species. And they showed me some glimpses of the future. And it's absolutely glorious. We're going to make it. We're going to suffer our way through this awkward transition. The analogy I use, it's like going through adolescence. The human species is going through its last stage of adolescence into adulthood. And as I said, I call it a transcendent transformation into a new race entirely. We are literally being genetically manipulated into a new species. And it's underway, and it's rather painful. And this going through this period of adolescence with our wars and our heartbreaks and miseries and hatreds and all of that, that there is a future for the human race, and it's absolutely glorious. We do have a future, Graham, and they made that pretty clear to me, that apparently the future is as clear to them as the past is. Because they tried to explain to me, which didn't even get to first base, that there is no such thing as time as we think of it, that humans' concept of time is not at all what it's really like. That out there in space-time, there's only an eternal present. Now, if you can grab onto that and make some sense out of that, you have my... I wish you well, because I'm still trying to come to terms with that myself. After 9 years, I'm still trying to grasp what the hell that means.
Now, when they showed you what the new Earth would look like, is there something in particular that really caught your eye or really sticks with you in terms of what you were shown?
Yeah, the thing that grabbed me the most, that, you know, I've always wanted to go to the stars. And I know that in a spiritual sense, we human beings are from the stars. That's our origin out there in time, space-time. And the future that they showed me is that the entire human species has gone to the stars, and it's taken its rightful place alongside of millions and millions of other species and civilizations and cultures. And that we're out there in the stars in the years yet to come. And that's our future. And the greatest dreams you could have of our old pathetic Star Trek movies, apparently we haven't even seen anything yet. The thing that really blew me away is that they inferred that there was something like, you know, remember when we used to go to the old Star Trek movies and talked about the Galactic Federation?
Right, yep.
Apparently there is something like that out there. And the headquarters for this thing is not even in our galaxy, for God's sake. That there is something like a Galactic Federation. There is an organization of advanced intelligences out there that they're almost practically godlike in their development and their evolution and their state of technology, and that there is a headquarters for this organization, but it isn't even in our galaxy. The image that I was given made me think of M31, Andromeda. I remember years ago when I was studying astronomy that the Andromeda galaxy is cataloged as M31 in our astronomical catalogs.
Okay.
And I got the impression that that was where the Galactic Federation was, or the headquarters was. Look, we have a future. The human race has a future, and that's the most exciting thing about it. And I try to tell people, you know, particularly these doomsday sayers.
Yeah.
These people are all, oh, the world's coming to an end on December 21st, blah, blah, blah. We're all doomed. Oh, poppycock. Balderdash, as I like to say. 100,000, a million people dropped dead today, Graham. And for them, the world came to an end. And a million others were born. So this doomsday bullshit, if you'll pardon my French, I just cannot tolerate it. And when I was with these other guys, I hate the word alien. I hate the word ET. That didn't even apply either.
Well, they're family.
So the term I like to use is their family. They are literally family.
Yeah.
And they indicated that there is a future for the human species, and it's a glorious future. And we have no idea, incredibly, what we're yet to become.
And is it fair to say, from what you've learned and from your perspective, that they are us, but many years down the road, and they're here helping us to evolve?
Well, you know, that's a pretty good question. That's a pretty good answer. When you consider there's no such thing as time. Hell, I could have been talking to human beings a million years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can travel in time like we get on a car and drive down the street to go to the grocery store.
And these
back in 1947, when that little accident took place in Roswell,
mm-hmm.
there was a German scientist. Well, von Braun was one of them, but they were shown the ship. And this German scientist looked at it and says, "That's a time ship. That's not a spaceship, that's a time ship." And then I learned when I was with them that when you travel in space, you do indeed travel in time. So yes, the guys that I spent 6 weeks with, who fed me like a pig, that could be human beings a million years ahead in the future. I didn't get a chance to ask them that question, and I'm not sure they would have answered me. But I drove them up the wall as it was.
Now, you were talking about the end of this year, December 2012. A lot of people feel that this year is significant, and it is the year that we're seeing this transition, this shift. Some people call it ascension. Some people call it the unfoldment, the evolution. Is that your understanding as well? Is that this is the year where we're going to see these big changes?
Well, you know, I was in Mexico City a year ago. I was a guest of Jaime Maussan down in Mexico City at a conference. And I got a chance to talk to a couple of old Mayan shamans. And you know what they really say? They really expect Quetzalcoatl to come back on December the 21st. That's what their calendar really says. They said that the world is not going to come to an end. The old world, the old cycle will come to a close, but the new beginning will begin, and they honestly expect Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, to return. Now, Quetzalcoatl, according to the ancient Mayan and Aztec Incan tradition, Kukulkan, this was a tall, white, bearded, and blue-eyed man that came to them thousands of years ago, taught them physics and science, astronomy, and all things. And then he promised when he left that he would be coming back. Well, some of the Mayan shamans believe that old Quetzalcoatl is coming back.
I see.
You know, Graham, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the real event that's going to probably change everything will probably be a massive confrontation with some of our cousins, where they're going to come down in giant ships 2 and 3 miles across, and they're going to land, and they're going to say, "Ah, your childhood is over."
You see that happening?
I see that almost anything is possible, Graham. I just hope if that does happen that I can hang around till December the 21st to see it.
Well, it's interesting that you speak to that. There are a lot of speculations around how our galactic family will make themselves more known, more visible. When is the right time? Is the end of this year significant? And I think there's a lot to point to that it is. You mentioned disclosure, and that from your vantage point, Earth isn't ready for that, and I think time will tell, right? It's certainly an interesting year, for sure.
Well, it's going to be an interesting year, and whether we're ready or not, I have a nagging suspicion, Graham, that they're going to show themselves in a big way before too long, and whether we're ready or not, it doesn't matter. That the time will come, as Robert Heinlein said, for childhood to come to an end. That, hey guys, here we are, we're family. Yeah. Now, we got a new beginning. We're going to start a new calendar, and we're going to count this day one, year zero. And I would like to hang around to see that happen.
Oh, yeah. Exciting times for sure. And they're here to help us.
Well, they've never been here to destroy us because they've been with us from the beginning. People asked me to describe them, and I said the closest I can come to is that they're custodians. They're nurturing the human species through this transition, and they're trying to help us make that transformation. And they're not necessarily benevolent, but they're not malevolent either.
What if you were to distill the information that you've learned, and perhaps equally as important, the information that you think is really important for people to hear, and you're to say that in a couple sentences, what is it that you think is most important?
Well, it's difficult to come up, and I know exactly what you're asking, and I'll do my best to try to tell you. After all that I've seen, after all that I've learned, and all of the things they've shown me, after 83 years of living, a lifetime, I've learned the two things that really, to me, are important. One, Graham, that there is no death, that human beings are spiritual beings and they are infinite and immortal. And the other thing that's the most important, I think, is that there is indeed a supreme being. There is a God. And that, to me, is all I need to know, and that's all I will ever need to know.
And along those lines, one of the interviews that I caught with you, you were talking about what you've learned about love.
Oh, God, love is the bottom line, Graham. Love is the power of the universe. Our Father in heaven loves us, and that's the most important issue. And if we could simply bring ourselves to love one another, my God, what a world this could be, huh?
Well, my hope and my vision is that that's where we're headed. So with this transition, with the support and help with our galactic family, the new Earth that we're creating, this new group or unity consciousness, that's the foundation. Love is the foundation.
Love is the foundation, Graham. You hit it right on the head there.
Well, it's been such a joy, Bob Dean, to have you on the show, and you have so much knowledge and so many years of experience, and thank you very much for your time, and I hope we can do this again.
Well, maybe we can, Graham. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.